What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, we did finally get that Nintendo Direct announced for this week, and it's basically what we expected, where we should see a bunch of third-party games announced for the Switch, and in fact, we've already had some of those leak out. We're going to go over all of that, though, here today. Also, we are going to be talking about that PlayStation Portal, which seems to have a bit more functionality now that it's been hacked and won't just be used for streaming games from your PlayStation 5. And while we're on the topic of Sony, it does appear that they have lost quite a bit of value in terms of just market capitalization, billions of dollars. And now analysts are weighing in on exactly why that's happening. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, for members, Newswave is available ad-free and early. If you want to learn more about that, check the join button down below this video on YouTube. And we're going to start today with Helldivers 2, which has basically been in the news because it's consistently posting higher and higher a concurrent player count on Steam. But unfortunately, that has now led to the situation of the game being unplayable if there's just too many people online at once. And we're starting to get more and more of an idea as to how many people are online at any given time, which we can see this posted up. This is by the Arrowhead CEO, who said the concurrent user count in-game hovered around 500,000 people at peak. Now, they did mention they had to kind of cap the game itself at 450,000 people online. And, well, if you log into the game and you're hit with a queue or just a waiting and you have to reset every 20 seconds, you just got to wait for someone to basically log off so you can then jump in. The problem we're running into right now is people have decided just to leave their PlayStation 5 on in-game when they're not playing the game so they can make sure they guaranteed a slot. So I guess when they go to work, they just leave their PlayStation 5 on all day and then come home and they're good to go because they never actually logged out, which of course is keeping the concurrent player count high, but also making it so it's just basically always full for the most part. And it's an interesting situation right now to where they're a victim of their own success, seemingly. So Sony and Arrowhead really need to get this figured out because it's pretty much impossible to recommend a game that you can't actually play, no matter how fun it is to play when you can get in. Also, while Final Fantasy fans are awaiting the release of Rebirth next week, go figure, the game has leaked out early. In fact, there are just images of the open casing like this, for example, over on the Final Fantasy VII Remake subreddit. And, I mean, you can see the disc art there, and of course there's multiple Blu-rays because the game is so large, but because of this, and there are more images, by the way, of people confirming that they got a copy early, so this seems to be somewhat widespread, more so than it just being one copy that got out there, and we'll see if the person actually posts any kind of spoilers, because there are now threads popping up, people basically cataloging their time in 3 or 4 hour blocks as they're going through and just summarizing the story. So yeah, there's spoilers floating around, and in fact, I would assume the ending of the game might even show up online before the game releases. So this is tough, because the story is a major driving factor for this entire thing. So be careful out there when it comes to spoilers. If you see threads popping up with spoiler in the title, don't just be like, oh, the game's not out yet. How could that happen? There's copies out there, so yeah. Watch out, it's gonna be tough. We gotta get to Thursday, and then a few more days later to make sure we can play through the game before we can start discussing the story, we'll say the ending, responsibly. Oh, and it does look like we're going to see a complete edition of Shin Megami Tensei 5, and this could be maybe its release on other platforms. Remember, we saw this in that NVIDIA leak list, and people were assuming, okay, that eventually it'll happen. Well, we can see this posted up by Gamatsu, as they did notice that Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance has been rated in Korea. Since this article was posted over on their website, that listing has been pulled down, so seems like it wasn't really supposed to go up just yet. Now, Shin Megami Tensei 5 released back at the end of 2021, so we're roughly 2.5 years out from when it first came out, and it seems like this would be an edition that would bring together improvements and additional content, and I assume if it's going to PlayStation and PC, visual upgrades, and of course frame rate enhancements. So that's kind of where we are now, sort of just waiting for this to be announced, as it seems like they had the description and title figured out, so it is happening. Will it be at this partner direct? Potentially, or who knows, Atlas could just push a press release and set a date right then and there. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with the Nintendo Direct that is now official. It is announced, and it is happening this week, and it's what we figured it would be. It's a partner showcase. We can see this, though, posted up by Nintendo over there on their official X account, where they say a Nintendo Direct partner showcase is coming. Watch on demand via YouTube, on February 21st, 6 a.m. Pacific time, for around 25 minutes of info focused on Nintendo Switch games coming in the first half of 2024 from our publishing and development partners. So, okay, 9 a.m. Eastern time, that's about what we'd expect from Nintendo, usually in the morning. But, of course, PRO went crazy, started just tweeting all kinds of stuff out, and of course, they're pretty much 100% accurate with everything they tease or kind of talk about here, and we can go down the list. So we have PR talking about Game Freak, asking if they're a partner. They technically would be a partner to Nintendo, sure. And while people started asking questions of Pokemon, like, oh wow, wait, are they going to announce a Pokemon game here? The running theory right now is Pocket Card Jockey. That was a game that did go, okay, so it was on 3DS, went to Apple Arcade, and now we're expecting either that version or maybe a new version maybe coming to the Switch, which, hey, I know it's not Pokemon. I know for people it might be like, oh, okay, who cares? But I mean, that is a fun game. It's a popular game in some circles, so there you go. But the other one is PRO saying sometimes Nintendo can be a partner because they love dolphins, which, okay, just kind of think about, okay, what would this have led to for people to speculate on? GameCube? I mean, sure, but the answer appears to be Endless Ocean coming to the Switch. Now look, Endless Ocean, I'm not gonna say it's a bad game. It was we'll say relaxing game on the Wii at that time. And I guess maybe it's just that being remastered or remade or something, or who knows, maybe it's a brand new one coming to the Switch, but it's not GameCube, so you can kind of see how people are getting their hopes up for this event and already disappointing everyone before it happens. And I will tell you, going into this, lower your whatever your expectations are right now, lower them at least another notch, all right? So I don't think this is going to blow the roof off the place for this Partner Direct, although it seems like we could see a demo for Contra, so I guess that would be kind of cool. It also seems that level 5 would be there in some capacity, so we'll keep an eye on that one. But otherwise, maybe Pentiment from Microsoft. That's what I mean. This isn't going to be a partner showcase that's going to be super memorable or make people jump out of their seats. Nothing like that. But for Nintendo, they're just trying to fill up their 2024 as best as they can, especially if the next system is indeed pushed out of the holiday season into the first half, we'll even say at this point, of 2025, as right now Nintendo is coming to the table with Princess Peach Showtime, and then a bunch of remasters and remakes, so maybe they will lean on third parties a bit more, but it really comes down to what they have to show at this partner showcase. And again, I don't know if I would go into this with super high expectations, just understand that it's probably going to be decent enough in terms of third-party offerings, and probably right now the one that I'm most interested in seeing is whatever level 5 is going to show up with here. I'm not expecting Silksong. I'll put it like that, but go in with those expectations, and hopefully it's nothing that would really disappoint people too much, although it's a direct. Most likely afterwards we'll get the initial reactions online and hear about how bad it was. Next up, let's talk about the PlayStation Portal, which to me is still a controller with a screen, considering it is completely reliant on you having a PlayStation 5 that is on and operational. But I understand some look at it and say, wow, it's kind of like their own handheld system again. I would like to see them attempt a new handheld, and based on rumors, there's a chance that Sony is starting up R&D and maybe planning for a release years down the line. But for now, the PlayStation Portal is what we have, and leave it to the hacking community to really unlock the potential of this device. We can see this is posted up over on X. This is from Andy, who's the Flow Zero, saying, after more than a month of hard work, PPSSPP is running natively on PlayStation Portal. Yes, we hacked it with help from XYZ and Zeta 2. So PPSSPP, as you probably understand, is the PSP emulator that is used on all different types of Android devices or Windows, anything like that, right? And it is a good emulator, and it seems like they at least have it functional. Now, this is an image here. I don't know how well this is actually running. I understand that there are people who want their PlayStation Portal to do just a little bit more, and I figured, look, eventually the hacking community will work this out and at least get something running on this thing, but it doesn't exactly have the strongest processor available to it. It's a pretty basic Snapdragon, and I believe it has about 6 gigabytes of storage on board, which well, I mean, PSP games can get shrunken down a decent amount, but you're not going to be fitting many on there at all. I don't know if we could get to a point where you can add storage to it, but I don't know if I would even recommend going out and getting one of these if PPSPP ran at least halfway decent, because there are many other options out there right now, especially with those Android emulators that are all over like the emulator systems that are all over the place, whether it's from like Aya Neo, we see that. We see Retroid, they've been putting out some better and better stuff now. So I understand the controller situation here is probably just better in general because they split a DualSense in half and then put a screen in between it, but I just don't think it's going to measure up in terms of the overall processing power compared to some of the other offerings that at times are $200 or even less than that. But it is still really fun just to see how far the hacking community can push things. This does not appear to be something that's going to be released anytime soon, and that's one of the reasons I think it's more of a proof of concept. But who knows, maybe they're able to really unlock things for the PlayStation Portal and it turns into this awesome emulator device down the road. It's just not something that's going to happen anytime soon. Next up, let's talk about Sony, who had kind of a rough day on the stock market after announcing the situation with the PlayStation, which didn't seem bad on paper when they talked about these record-breaking revenues for them, with the Q3 earnings being the highest they've ever had. But when they started to have to talk about lowering their overall forecast for PlayStation 5 units, and then talk about how much smaller their margins are despite revenue being so high, that was a combination for their stock to just get absolutely crushed. And in fact, CNBC did some calculations. We can see this is posted up over on their website, where they say the company's shares fell after the announcement with around $10 billion of value wiped off the stock since the forecast cut, according to a CNBC calculation using FactSet data. The shipment forecast cut for PS5 is not what is disappointing. What is disappointing is the low level of operating margin. This is from Atul Goyal, who's the equity analyst at Jefferies. And this is a note to clients. So trying to explain to potential investors and stuff in these stocks as to why they're kind of lowering their overall view of Sony right now with the PlayStation. Their revenue on digital sales, add-on content, digital downloads are at all-time highs, and yet their margins are at decades low. This is just not acceptable. And to me, this is a major disconnect between the gaming discourse online for social media, for example, and then the business world and business realities that come with these companies. So in this case, it doesn't seem like the investors or the stock market really cares that they cut down on how many systems they're shipping out. They cared about the margins getting smaller, which is not at all something that gamers seem to talk about. They mostly talk about how many systems are being shipped out, which is funny because technically these companies either lose money or just break even on those consoles, and that's something that investors and the stock market really doesn't like. They see it as the means to an end, which should be larger margins. But the fact that Sony turned in such high revenue targets and results, but their margins are so thin, it's as they say, it's kind of a recipe for disaster, because what happens if those record-breaking numbers for revenue start to fall down a bit? What happens to those margins then? Do they get even smaller because their costs are so high? And that's one of the big reasons why the CFO, Hiroki Totoki, talked about trying to rein in some of their studios, saying, hey, they're really good at what they do, but they got to figure out how to budget and manage correctly with how much these games are costing, because the budgets keep going up and up and up, but people are already not happy with the $70 price tag. So does the price tag go up, or do they start cutting back on, you could say, quality, but just some of the attention to detail, to be honest, that a lot of people don't necessarily notice. Like, the mainstream isn't going to notice every little plant off to the side, and if you clip through it, but they would notice, obviously, some of the big explosions or thing directly in front of you that, but while focusing on that and pulling in some of the scope, wouldn't be as big of a thing to overcome, as opposed to leaving a game in development for an extra year just to iron out all those little extra details. But I think this will be a very interesting year for Sony as they try to work out how exactly to raise those margins. And if it's not pricing that's going to go up, they're going to start trying to find more customers. And that's one of the reasons that I think we're on a crash course with one of their new intellectual properties, single-player games, coming out on PC and PlayStation 5 day one. And based on what Helldivers 2 is doing, which is, again, successful so much, or it's successful to a degree that the game itself is having a hard time just functioning and them finding enough room for everyone that, yeah, I feel like Sony realizes, oh, there is money to be made there. What happens when a single-player game is available day and date? Well, I think we're going to find out sooner rather than later on that one. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about a report that was published showing that Nintendo is technically the richest company in Japan. Now, we can see this is posted up. This is over on Toyo Kaizai, and the way that they figured this out, all right, is through net cash calculated by subtracting interest-bearing debt and advances received from the total amount of cash and deposits and short-term securities held. Basically, how much debt do you have versus how much cash do you have on hand? Well, Nintendo really doesn't have any debt for the most part, and they just have a bunch of money. And a lot of this, of course, being accrued from the Switch generation, where they were just making a stupid amount of money from software and even the hardware, which wasn't really costing them a ton of money versus what you might see from a typical console generation. While prices haven't exactly gone the way that they would like because what happened with inflation, they still weren't like losing a ton of money from shipping a bunch of systems. But Nintendo ranked first with 1.7186 trillion yen. That comes out to over $11 billion. What's really funny about this, so you look at that and go, wow, that's a lot of money to have on hand. And technically it is. You're viewed as, which is really funny, they outline this here. If you have a bunch of money on hand, you're viewed as needing that money for some reason. Like you're accruing money because you don't have enough money. In this case, Nintendo is just an incredibly conservative company. They view that as more of a safety net so that if they do have a Wii U moment, they can survive it because gaming is like their sole focus. Now, they of course made a bunch of money from the Mario movie that did incredibly well for them, and it seems like their theme parks are also turning a pretty nice profit for them alongside of that. So them also expanding outwards is another reason they're piling up so much money. So technically they could make a large acquisition if they wanted to or needed to, or survive multiple failures of generations in the future. But based on what they're doing with the Switch, and if they're able to pull off a successful transition in terms of the generation, seems like they might just keep stockpiling money. I'm curious if they ever make a big move, but otherwise, they might just like the comfort and safety knowing they just have a stupid amount of money in the bank at any given time. And before we go to the comments of the day, we're gonna take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday. We're asked, are you expecting a major new game from Nintendo for 2024? 64% say no, they'll have mostly remakes and remasters this year. 36% say yes, they'll have something ready for this year. Well, I think if they had their new system later this holiday, they would have obviously a big game coming out. It feels like all of their big titles would be pushed to the next generation because they want to make sure that system is off and running. I mean, the Switch, when it first came out in 2017, had an incredible first year. You can even just look at the two tentpole games, that being Zelda and Mario Odyssey, and then there were other games, of course, sprinkled in there, but having a big-time 3D Mario and a big-time 3D Zelda was great for a new system to come out to. So I think Nintendo is like seriously all hands on deck, ton of focus currently to make sure they have their software ready to go for next generation. So I wouldn't be shocked if, I don't say coasted, but reined it in a bit for the rest of this year through the holiday and then really kickstarted next year. If again, the system is indeed coming out in 2025 and missing the 2024 holiday. And we'll finish up with the comments of the day. We'll start with this one here. This is from Superhero saying, entitlements, ownership, piracy it is. You know what's interesting about that, and I did consider this a little bit with piracy. How do you end up pirating games in the future if it's all cloud-based and you never download a thing? That's something else that these publishers are working towards because they do understand that eventually you won't even have access enough to pirate the game. It all has to come from their servers if we really do get to cloud streaming as the default, maybe 15 or 20 years from now. So I get the entitlement thing, the ownership thing, and people do turn to piracy, even at times for just preservation of different games. But in a perfect world that these publishers are dreaming about and envisioning, you won't even have enough ownership or access to pirate the games. That would be, that'd be something for the future of video games. And we'll finish up with a comment from the members video, which we can see here. This is from Loom, who says, if Nintendo is delaying Switch 2 to March 2025, I wonder what they'll do for this March then. Having that rumor to reveal video this March seems unlikely if that's the case. I think they'll still need to say something in March before their next investor briefing. It's likely they'll do a business wire post that announces a 2025 launch date, reveals the code name, and maybe gives us some other minor information, just enough so they can get shareholders and the public off their backs for their future plans. Yeah, they will get hammered big time at their next annual shareholders gathering, which is usually over the summer, like end of June, July, I believe. But they will have question after question after question asked about, okay, guys, what's the plan for this holiday and what's the plan for next generation? Because this seems very strange right now that we potentially could be wrapping up the 8th year of this system next March, and we haven't heard anything about what's next. So I think you might be onto something. If they don't have this reveal in March, maybe plans have shifted and changed. A codename reveal, maybe in like a press release, or as you say, like a Business Wire release, some kind of interview that's controlled, might be the way to go, just to get something out there so that we can start setting up the next generation system. But it's seems very weird with all the stories going around exactly what is happening at Nintendo, but I guess, again, we'll see as we get closer to their eventual investors briefing, because that is going to be a very weird time for Nintendo to navigate if they really are struggling behind the scenes, getting everything ready to go for launch, potentially in 2025. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. Whether it's Nintendo's partner showcase that is airing tomorrow, give me some of your predictions down below and what you would like to see there. And then also, what about the PlayStation Portal? Let's just hypothetically speaking, if this thing ended up turning into an emulation powerhouse somehow, would you then consider picking one up for the $200 price tag? And then Nintendo is the richest company apparently in Japan. Do you think they make any major moves with the large cash reserves they have now, or do they just kind of hang out and say, I think we're good with over $11 billion sitting in the bank? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.